It's Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special, taking a look at the AV Network Nation event December 10th. And with me, talk about NETGEAR's involvement is Laurent Mazia from NETGEAR. Welcome, sir.
Hey, team. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for your involvement. We're really excited about this. Again, December 10th, you can get 4.75 CTS RUs by hanging out with me and my buddy Megan Dutta all day from AV Network. I am doing two programs and two chats on, one's on AV over IP, another one's on audio network security. That's actually kind of why I wanted to talk with you, Laurent, is Netgear is kind of at the center, and Netgear, as well as some of your competitors that also make switches, but the switch, right, it has become center to the AV system. Talk for a second before we get into the nuts and bolts of it. Talk for a second about that evolution, and as somebody who's worked for Netgear for quite a while, what that's been to watch that evolution.
Oh, I mean, that was passionating. So, yeah, let me tell you about that because we have seen the adoption of AV over IP. It keeps growing and growing. And people are actually realizing that the network switch, as you said, is the fabric, what used to be handled by other kind of circuit-based systems or switchers, right? And of course, the network switch became central for AV over IP. And the problem, well, many problems were, probably observed, but the main one is that despite it is configurable and you can get it there, but if there is something wrong in the fabric, the whole AV experience is ruined, right?
Yeah.
So we actually started to be in touch closely with a couple of AV manufacturers in the old days in 2013, 14, 15, because those manufacturers were using our switches. And for us, that was like a new application. But since then, you're right. It became a passion and even a business unit somehow at Netgear with a full team dedicated to the Pro AV environment. You know why? Because we understood that the learning curve was so much, and that also those AV codecs, audio, AES-67, Dante, AVB, all that, but also video from NVX to AMX to NDI to SDVOE on the 10 gig Ethernet side, they are very demanding. So the network switches must be robust, reliable, maybe easier to configure, but more importantly, we realized that for us, coming from the IT space, I'm in Netgear for 15 years, but Netgear, we are doing networks for IT for more than 25 years now. We understood that there was room for innovation. So we started to collaborate, discuss all these issues, and well, 2020, we have, I hope, helped the AV community, and I'm glad we can discuss about it today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the fact that that evolution is 2013, 2012 in there. That kind of culminated in the last couple of years with the development of that business unit for Netgear, where you guys have a dedicated set of professionals, yourself included, that are dedicated to the AV space. People like our buddy John Henkel, who came from the AV side, now works within Netgear, and you guys have added AV as part of your fabric, right? Part of your infrastructure. I think that is fascinating. But one thing I want to talk about, though, is you said learning curve there, and that has been a common conversation that the AV community has had. And I am of a certain age where I still did RGB HV, right? I soldered and I didn't solder. We crimped RGB HV, but soldered audio cables and connectors 20, 25 years ago. And now we have a generation like me and folks that are older who used to do analog, right? And we've moved into the digital space. Fine, we'll do the HDMI connector. Okay, I got you. No, not a problem there. I can't solder it, but I got you. But you've also got us that have gone from, okay, now we've gone from analog to digital, and now we've gone from, again, let's say VGA connector to a 15-pin VGA to an HDMI. Okay, there's that digital conversion. Now we're moving into an Ethernet jack. So this learning curve for the generation of me and the ones before me is a little bit steeper, I think, maybe sometimes. So talk for a second about what Netgear has been able to do to bring along those folks that are 100%. They came up as green techs in the analog world, and now we've kind of pushed them through digital, and now we're on the network, right? So talk about that transition and where you're able to educate those folks.
Yeah, sure, Tim. So, well, I mean, as you said, it started a long time ago, and very rapidly. Well, we had when I say we, the industry, right? We had IT switches, so we provided those IT switches to these AV system integrators or installers, AV community. And guess what? They had to, use those IT switches, and very often they had to learn how to configure those IT switches for AV. So when we started to collect all these feedback, we realized that using an IT switch for an AV application, it brings a lot of issues. The first one is probably the aesthetics, because an IT switch is like a pizza box for a data center, so it doesn't really look pretty in an AV rack. So we tried to fix it, learning from all these discussions, and now we at Netgear have very elegant black, sleek design switchers that can be in an AV rack with information on both sides, and they look good. But more than that, an IT switch is a nightmare inside, right? Because you need to tell the switch what to do for Dante. You need to tell the switch what to do for NDI or AES67 or NVXs. And all these acronyms that you probably heard a million of times, right? DSCP, PTP, IGMP. I mean, that's hard. That's even hard for IT people, So, but for AV customers, that's almost a mission impossible because you need to do things by the book. And sometimes, it's cumbersome. So we actually understood that the AV community needed a new way, another way for configuring those IT switches. So we got rid of everything we were doing before, and we restarted from scratch. This time, I mean, it's we just wanted to offer a list of pre-configured profiles called Dante, NVX, NDI, AES67, AVB, and those profiles are a snap to apply to a port or a group of ports. And all the parameters, the IGMP, the PTP, the DSCP, all that is automatically done by the switch because the AV administrator told the switch that this port got to do Dante. And I believe that by doing that, not only we remove the complexity, but also all that is prone to mistakes, because when you do things by the book, the AV is becoming more complex every day. Before, it was audio or video. Now it's both at the same time with those encode decode units. They de-embed audio, they transform it into other type of packets. That's a nightmare. And we I mean, at least tried to simplify all that because we believe that other IT vendors, they complexify things a little too much, and a need was there. So I believe that with the new generation of AV switches in the AV line that we have named M4250, we managed to bridge that gap with the good hardware and a good software easier. So maybe if you want later on, I can show it to you. But to finish my point, I want to add the last thing, Tim, because it's not all about hardware and software. The service and the support are also extremely important because sometimes you said it, you have a personnel on site, for that venue or for that conference room. I mean, they are not so sure actually what is DSCP or what must be done. I mean, at the beginning. So we also understood that not only the hardware and software got to be provided, but also a team of AV slash IT professionals should be available 24-hour on every time zone to manage those projects with the AV community. And it's not only for the design, you said it, but it's really much for the installation, the configuration, and the troubleshooting, if any. Because IT and AV, this is so different. In the IT world, you have IT admins. They are used to create tickets, into a portal, and they manage bugs. You have bugs everywhere. But in the AV, forget it, right? When you have a D-Day, when you have an installation time, it got to work. And they can't open a ticket into a web portal for support. So we have come with the team, and yes, I'm a proud member of professionals. They just handle that, and the AV installer has one contact, to talk to for the life of the project. So
Yeah.
that's why you're right. We wanted to commit in first place that our role is to make it possible. We want to simplify this AV over IP transition.
Absolutely. And Laurent, not for anything, but Laurent is in Paris, right? You're in
That's
France.
yeah.
And so Laurent is 6 hours ahead of Eastern time. You mentioned the fact that you guys Netgear has 24/7 support. That's how they're able to do that, is they've got them in different places around the world. I want to get into something you talked about, and that is the configuring the switch and taking a look at the interface, right? Um, and so we're going to take a look at the new interface right now for the AV community. And this is where Laurent mentioned the fact that they've got different profiles for NDI, for NVX, for AES67, for Dante. So just kind of take us through the next few minutes about how each one looks and why you guys were what the thinking behind kind of the different profiles were. Obviously, you guys know the back end, and you're working with the manufacturers and the software manufacturers as well, whether that's SDVOE or that's NVX with Crestron, to get the right ports and also to get the right configuration down.
Absolutely. In fact, this is a mutual certification. So we know we like to describe ourselves as a network fabric. So, I mean, by being certified by Crestron for the digital media, NVX, or by Harman for AMX, that's a great honor for us. And this is how we could understand fully in a strict certification process, or sometimes something less formal, but by collaborating the right set of parameters. Then after that you can test it, QA, and then deliver it into a profile. So Tim, thank you. I am going to share my screen real quick then. You should see now the M4250. Let's fire up
Yep.
one of those switches that I have in my bag. Okay, so I'm going to connect to a um, PUE M4250 switch. And the first, thing that we can do is to log to that cumbersome IT interface. That's not what we want to do. So we are going to add a colon 8080, and we are going to fire up a totally different, entirely new user interface that speaks the AV language. So
Wow.
in comparison with the IT stuff, it's simplified, so that the strict minimum can be seen on the first page. This is where we can shut down the fans, because we understood, for instance, that some places are very noise sensitive, like your studio or a conference room. But Tim, let's go to the point. Let's now configure from scratch this little 8-port PoE plus switch for audio and video, and we'll take care of those fiber uplinks later. So I'm an AV installer. If there's one thing I know today is what type of audio or video devices I need to deploy, right? So let's say that my first thing is to deploy Dante audio for my primary Dante on the network. I will locate that profile, select it. I will check the ports I want to configure. I will give it a name. That's going to be my Dante primary. Maybe have a color for convenience, green for Dante, all right? And I will specify, I will tell the switch, I want you to use a dedicated VLAN for it. I want you to use the VLAN 10 for my Dante. I save it. And instantly, now my switch shows 4 green ports that are configured for Dante VLAN 10. We did not speak about Bonjour MDNS for the Dante control, right? We didn't speak about IGMP for the multicasting, or worst, PTP, or even the DSCP queues for the quality of service, because this is taken care of in that Dante profile. Now, Tim, pick your choice for video. What do you want to deploy on that switch right now?
Let's go ahead and do NVX.
All right.
Yeah.
So we are going to find a video profile that specifies the Crestron NVX. We are going to select it. Let's say we want to deploy 4 NVX encode decode units. Let's say that's the latest generation, the 360s. I don't want to mix and match my Dante with my video. You know, the best practice usually is to segregate the video into a dedicated VLAN. Let's say the VLAN 20, and red is never good, right? Let's go for blue for NVX and save it. So now, well, we should see 4 blue ports that are configured for video this time with the right IGMP. So that's what I wanted to show, because of course, if we had an hour, I could actually then explain all those parameters, you know, in the background, in the kitchen. But that's not the point today, because this should be now, you know, enabling more AV over IP applications to the vast majority of AV system integrators throughout the country and worldwide.
So here are a couple questions before we let you go on this one. Once you set that, and you said that the parameters are already set, can you dig in there even deeper if you need to adjust some of those parameters, or is it's baked in and you can't adjust anything?
So you can do many things inside, but when it comes to the set of parameters for IP, DSCP, PTP, IGMP, you cannot, right? Because as you just said, this is the best set that is, you know, pre-configured. On the other hand, if you don't trust me that much, you know, you can set your own. You know, you can create your own template, your
Oh
own
wow.
profile from scratch. And
Yeah.
yes, then you will be able to have more control. But you know, after that, I want to show you something real quick. Let's edit that NVX. Let's say we want to add 2 more ports, okay, for the fun. But you know what? It's very often those AV installations, they require a DHCP server, you know, so that the NVX units, they get an IP address out of the switch.
Yeah.
So we have enabled that right there in the switch, because, you know, enabling a DHCP server uh, is usually a nightmare in the IT interface. You need to do a pool, and then you need to do plenty of things. Let's do that here real quick. I will select an IP address of my choice, you know, that will be the IP address of that switch for that NVX VLAN. And I can set up the DHCP server using the very same IP address as a router for my NVXs.
Oh
And
wow.
now I am saving it. And now all my blue NVX units will get an IP address of that switch. So you still can control a lot of things, but you're done with the most difficult parameters, because you know that this profile has been certified and put on the partner program website from digital media for NVX. Yeah.
Well, and that right there is incredibly important. And I don't want to gloss over that. The fact that you guys are working with several manufacturers, and I'm not going to sit here and list them all because you're right, we don't have an hour. But the fact that you guys are working with directly with the manufacturers, whether that is QSC or it's Crestron or it's even down to SDVOE, which is an overarching group with several different manufacturers that utilize that protocol. I think is incredibly important, and the settings and the parameters you guys are putting in here are the ones that they've certified, right? This is not just you guys working in a vacuum. You're working with those manufacturers to certify these settings.
Absolutely. And it's not meant to be, for forever. I mean, we will uh, continue to collaborate closely with Audinate for Dante, to make sure that we can evolve as would the codec for Dante will. And well, I mean, I could show you a few other things, but this is all about it, because the last thing I wanted to maybe demonstrate real quick is that we removed the configuration between the switches. So when we have done the blue and the red on one switch, we can do it on another switch, maybe with other ports, and we can connect those switches together using,
Mm,
copper or fiber wiring. And the switches with the IGMP plus, which is actually meant to be automation. So the IGMP, the multicasting, is fairly automatic. The switches will discuss, shake hands, and deal with each other without any user intervention, no configuration.
oh, wow.
So that's what I wanted to, explain today. We believe that network should not be something that blocks the AV over IP transition. There's no vertical when you look at the entire Pro AV world, from medical to, of course, education, headquarters, command control centers. I mean, there's virtually no exception. AV over IP can provide a lot of benefits. It can scale. It's less expensive. It's meant to be more interoperable. So AV over IP is a big trend, but the networking was a problem, and we felt that there was a need for simplification here, and that's how Netgear want to behave in that industry. We believe that there is room for innovation so that the network is allowing AV over IP. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Again, we're going to hang out and talk more about this on December 10th from 9 a.m. Until let's say 7 or 8 p.m. And the reason I'm saying 7 or 8 p.m. because there's a happy hour at the end of the day, and you guys can hang around and do that. But really, 9 to 5 Eastern is when we're really going to start doing it, and then the happy hour starts at 7. There's an exhibit hall. You can check out more from Netgear there. Again, avnetworknation.com is where you can find out more information. But Laurent, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or Netgear, how do they do that?
Well, the easiest is the Pro AV Engineering Services team email access. Really easy. Pick your own, either proav@netgear.com or proavdesign@netgear.com. I prefer the second one, so that you can remember. proavdesign@netgear.com. This is actually reaching the entire group within
Oh, wow.
Netgear with the pre-sales, post-sales engineers that are now 100% dedicated to accompany any AV over IP project.
All right, very good. Laurent Mazia from Netgear. Thank you, sir. Again, for us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. But more importantly, come hang out with us on December 10th. Go to avnetworknation.com, register, get yourself 4.75 CTS RUs. That's CTS, CTSD, and CTSI, which is kind of cool. December 10th from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Eastern Time at avnetworknation.com. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been an AVNation special.